Everyone at the gala believed the same cruel story. A single father like Caleb Hart would never choose a plus-size billionaire unless there was money behind it. They were wrong. 10 weeks earlier, Caleb had walked into a Chicago restaurant expecting an awkward blind date and an early ride home. Instead, he found Audrey Langford, sitting beneath amber lights surrounded by people who praised her success while quietly punishing her for the space she occupied. Caleb noticed the small things no one else did, the way her hand tightened around her glass, the way every smile looked practiced, the way a powerful woman could still seem completely alone in a crowded room. This is not simply a story about attraction. It is about dignity, trust, fatherhood, and what happens when someone finally sees the person behind the judgment. Stay until the end. Like the video and tell us what city you are watching from. 10 weeks earlier, before the ballroom, before the whispers, before Caleb Hart ever learned how much courage it took for Audrey Langford to enter a room that had already judged her, he was standing in his kitchen arguing with an 8-year-old about Saturn. The Ravenswood apartment was warm from the oven and crowded with school papers, bridge reports, and crayon stars taped across one wall. At the kitchen table, June Hart pressed silver foil around the head of a stuffed raccoon. Captain Vega, according to June, was preparing for the most important mission in human history. Caleb stood at the counter in a white button-down shirt trying to remove a coffee stain with a wet dish towel. June looked up. "You changed shirts. I spilled coffee. You changed twice." The first replacement had a problem. What problem? Caleb looked toward the bedroom where the rejected shirt was hanging over a chair. It did not cooperate. June narrowed her eyes in the same way her mother did when she suspected a weak explanation. "You are going on a date. It is dinner. With a woman with 7 people, that is too many people for a date." Caleb stopped rubbing the stain and looked at her. "That is exactly what I said." June returned to Captain Vega's helmet. "Are you scared? No. You keep fixing your sleeves." Caleb dropped his hands. "I am not scared. I just do not want to go." June considered that. "You always say not wanting to do something is not the same as having a reason." "I say that when you do not want to brush your teeth. You did not specify." A key turned in the front door. Rebecca stepped inside, bringing a gust of November air with her. She wore a dark wool coat and carried June's overnight bag over one shoulder. Her hair was damp from the light rain outside. June slid from her chair and ran to her. "Mom-Dad has a date with 7 people." Rebecca looked at Caleb. "Claire finally won. She wore me down." Rebecca set the bag near the door and studied him for a moment. 5 years after the divorce, they had become good at calendars, school pickups, and keeping June away from conflicts that belonged only to adults. Rebecca adjusted June's scarf. "Try not to stare at the woman until she confesses." Caleb reached for his jacket. "I do not do that. You inspect bridges for a living. You stare at everything like it might collapse. That is how you prevent collapse." Rebecca smiled. "Exactly." June held up Captain Vega. "He needs to come. To your mother's house, to the date. No, he gives good advice. He believes he can reach Saturn in a cardboard box. He is ambitious." Caleb crouched in front of her. "You are going to have a good weekend with your mom. I am going to eat one dinner. Everyone survives." June wrapped her arms around his neck. "Do not be boring. I make no promises." When the door closed behind Rebecca and June, the apartment changed. The radiator clicked and a train groaned beyond the brick buildings, but the rooms had lost their center. Caleb stood alone in the kitchen, looking at the small foil scraps scattered around Captain Vega's unfinished spacecraft. He checked the time. Then he changed his shirt again. The Bellwether occupied a restored warehouse in the West Loop where amber lights glowed over dark wood, and tables sat far enough apart to protect private conversations. Caleb arrived at 7:28. He paused outside the private dining room with one hand on the brass handle. For a moment he considered leaving. He could tell Claire that June had called. He could say something came up at work. A bridge emergency sounded impressive and was vague enough to resist questions. The door opened before he decided. Mason Donovan stood on the other side. "You came. I said I would. You often say things in a tone that means you will not." Caleb stepped inside. Mason clapped him on the shoulder with enough force to make the nearest water glass tremble. A long table faced tall windows overlooking the elevated tracks. Claire rose from her seat and crossed toward Caleb. She kissed his cheek. "You look nice. That makes one of us uncomfortable. You are going to behave." I always behave. Mason made a small sound. Claire ignored him and guided Caleb toward the table. He recognized only one guest from local business pages. Trevor Bell was in his early 40s, narrow through the shoulders with a silver watch that caught the light whenever he moved. Trevor stood and offered a firm grip. Mason tells me you work for the city, consulting firm, mostly city contracts, roads, bridges. Trevor nodded as though Caleb had confirmed something modest but acceptable. Useful work. Caleb took the empty chair beside another empty chair. Claire placed a glass of sparkling water in front of him. She is coming directly from a board meeting. Caleb looked at her. Who is Audrey? What does Audrey do? Claire hesitated. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. Mason reached for the wine. She runs Langford Strategic Holdings. Caleb kept his voice low. The investment firm, yes. The one with the building on Wacker. Claire sat beside Mason. They lease several floors. You set me up with a billionaire. Claire leaned closer. I set you up with Audrey. That sentence was designed to avoid the first sentence. She is smart, she is funny, she serves on the literacy board with me, and she is one of the few people there who reads the financial packets before meetings. That is your romantic endorsement. It is a strong endorsement. The door opened. The room reacted before anyone spoke. It was not dramatic. No one gasped, no chair scraped backward. The change was smaller and more revealing than that. Trevor's eyes moved first. The woman beside him looked at Claire, then quickly toward her plate. Mason lifted his wineglass without drinking from it. One of the other guests straightened as though preparing to receive important information. Audrey Langford stepped into the room. She wore a dark blue dress beneath a charcoal coat. Her black hair was pinned loosely at the back of her head with several strands softened by the damp air outside. She carried a leather portfolio in one hand and her phone in the other. She was a large woman. The fact existed in the room before her name did. Caleb saw the recognition pass across every face. He also saw that Audrey recognized the recognition. She handed her coat to the server. Her posture became perfect. Her expression settled into something warm enough to be polite and controlled enough to reveal nothing. Only her eyes looked tired. Claire rose. Audrey, I am so glad you made it. The board discovered 3 new questions at 6:40. Audrey kissed Claire's cheek. I escaped before they found a 4th. A few people laughed. Claire turned toward the table. You know Mason. This is Trevor and Elise Daniel and Nora, Peter, and Susan. Then she looked toward Caleb. And this is Caleb Hart. Caleb stood. Audrey stopped for the smallest fraction of a second. Something shifted in her face. Surprise, perhaps, or caution having to adjust itself. He pulled out the chair beside him. Caleb. Audrey. She sat. You are not late, he said. She glanced toward the clock above the sideboard. I am 4 minutes late. The train passed twice. That counts as an environmental delay. Audrey looked at him. A smile appeared at one corner of her mouth. You calculate delays professionally. Mostly I calculate how long things should take. Then people ignore me. Then I become right several months later. That sounds satisfying. It is less satisfying than you would think. Her smile stayed for one more second before she reached for her water. Dinner began with roasted squash soup while conversation moved through hotels' property taxes and a delayed development near Fulton Market. Caleb spoke when someone addressed him and listened when they did not. Beside him, Audrey performed a more difficult version of the same task. She was attentive without appearing eager and knowledgeable without sounding corrective. When Daniel mentioned that shipping costs had fallen by almost 12% across the previous quarter, Audrey folded her napkin once before speaking. That was the early estimate. The revised national figure was closer to 8. Daniel frowned. I thought I read 12. You probably did. The first report used incomplete port data. Her tone left him room to be wrong without feeling embarrassed. Trevor swirled his wine. You keep track of everything. Only the things people confidently say incorrectly. Caleb looked down at his soup to hide a smile. Audrey noticed. What nothing? You disagree? I was trying not to reward the comment. That was wise. It was too late. A real smile moved across her face, not the one she had brought into the room. This one arrived before she could arrange it. The second course came. Trevor turned his attention toward Audrey with the concentration of a man who had decided he was being charming. I have always wondered what it is like to be such a visible presence in finance. Audrey placed her fork beside her plate. What kind of visibility? Trevor smiled. Young, female, unconventional. The word settled over the table. Audrey's expression did not change. Unconventional in which way? Trevor made a loose gesture with one hand. You know, you have a distinctive presence. I imagine people remember you. Claire's shoulders tightened as Audrey's thumb pressed once against her water glass. She answered evenly, I prefer that they remember the terms of the deal. Trevor laughed. Of course. I meant it as a compliment. Caleb lifted his eyes. Then you should probably make the compliment recognizable. The room went still. Trevor looked at him. I was being perfectly respectful. Caleb nodded. Good. Then there is no problem. He returned to his plate. Audrey turned toward Caleb. He did not look at her immediately. He was not waiting for gratitude. That was the first thing she noticed. The conversation recovered slowly as the train flashed past the windows. A few minutes later, Audrey leaned slightly toward Caleb. Do you always do that? Eat slowly, make people hear themselves? Caleb took a sip of water. Only when they seemed to have missed the opportunity. She studied him. That can be dangerous. Bridges are more dangerous. What kind do you work on? Rehabilitation, steel trusses, foundations, load systems. Right now, the Wells Street Bridge. Audrey's attention sharpened. The Northern Approach repairs. You know the project. My firm holds municipal debt tied to several transportation corridors. That sounds less interesting than actually crossing them. It usually is. He looked at her. What part of your work do you like? The question seemed to catch her unprepared. She glanced across the table as though checking whether anyone else had heard it. Yes. People usually ask what my firm manages. I assume a large number with several commas. $6 billion. That is several commas. She almost smiled. Then she considered the question seriously. I like finding the weak point before it becomes a collapse. Caleb rested one hand near his glass. That is also most of my job. Audrey looked at him differently after that. The space between them became easier. They spoke while the larger conversation rose and fell around them. Caleb told her about growing up near Toledo, where his father repaired elevators for 32 years and distrusted any machine that claimed to be intelligent. Audrey told him she had grown up in Connecticut and moved to Chicago after college because New York made ambition feel too crowded. He told her June was 8 and believed her stuffed raccoon was training for a mission to Saturn. Is he qualified? Audrey asked. No. Does he have funding? He has $3.12. That is an early-stage problem. You sound concerned. I am concerned about governance. Caleb laughed. It happened easily enough that he noticed only after Audrey looked at him. Her expression softened. For a while, the dinner became almost ordinary. Then dessert arrived. Claire mentioned the Chicago Futures Foundation Gala scheduled for January. Susan had already chosen a dress. Elise complained about formal shoes. Trevor looked toward Audrey. Finding the right designer for an event like that must be a project. Audrey's hand stopped beside her coffee cup. I use a tailor. That makes sense. Trevor leaned back. I imagine alterations are not optional. The silence this time was shorter. Caleb placed his spoon on the plate. The small sound cut through the room. You have mentioned her body 4 times. Trevor stared at him. I have not mentioned her body once. You have. You keep hiding it inside other sentences. Claire did not move. Trevor's face tightened. You are reading something into harmless conversation. Caleb's voice remained calm. No, I am removing the packaging. Elise touched Trevor's arm. He ignored her. Caleb continued. You are sitting 3 feet from a woman who manages $6 billion, understands municipal debt corrected 2 numbers without humiliating anyone, and has shown more patience than the rest of us combined. He glanced toward Audrey, then back at Trevor. And the most interesting observation you have produced is that she occupies a chair. Trevor's jaw shifted. I think you are trying very hard to impress someone you just met. Caleb looked at him. I think you are trying very hard not to say what you mean. Claire finally spoke. Trevor. He lifted both hands. Fine. Clearly I misjudged the atmosphere. Audrey's voice was quiet. No. You understood the atmosphere. You assumed everyone else would protect it for you. Trevor looked at her. For the first time that evening, Audrey did not soften the correction. She did not give him a place to hide. He reached for his wine and found the glass empty. The conversation never fully recovered. 20 minutes later, Trevor and Elise left. Goodbyes followed soon after. Outside, the rain had turned to thin snow. The street shone beneath headlights. Trains thundered overhead. Warm air escaped from the restaurant each time the door opened and vanished into the cold. Audrey stood beneath the awning waiting for her driver. Caleb stood several feet away, checking the arrival time of his car. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Audrey said, "You did not have to do that. I know. I can handle men like Trevor. I know that too." She turned toward him. Then why Caleb put his phone into his coat pocket. Across the street, a bus moved through the intersection, its windows filled with tired faces. Because being capable of surviving something does not make it acceptable. Audrey looked at him. Snow gathered along the curb as traffic moved past them. Audrey's expression remained composed, but the effort behind it had become visible. "I almost canceled tonight," she said. "How many times twice? Why did you come? Claire said you were kind." Caleb winced. "That is a dangerous recommendation. It usually means dull. Did I meet expectations? Not completely." He smiled. Audrey looked toward the street. "Most dinners like this end the same way. How I sit in the car and replay everything." Her voice stayed level. "Whether I spoke too much, whether I laughed too loudly, whether I ordered the wrong thing, whether I occupied more space than the room was willing to give me." Caleb said nothing. He did not rush to deny it. He did not tell her the room had been wrong. She already knew. A black sedan pulled toward the curb. Audrey looked at him again. "Tonight I am wondering whether your daughter's raccoon has considered the fuel problem. He has not. Then he needs better engineering." The driver opened the rear door. Audrey stepped toward the car, then paused. "Good night, Caleb. Good night, Audrey." She entered the sedan. Caleb watched the red lights disappear beneath the tracks. When he returned to Ravenswood, the apartment was still empty. He loosened his collar, turned on the kitchen light, and found Captain Vega sitting inside the cardboard spacecraft exactly where June had left him. Caleb picked up the stuffed raccoon. "You have a funding problem." Captain Vega offered no defense. Caleb set him back on the table. He took out his phone and opened Claire's name. He stood beneath the kitchen light, listening to the wind press against the windows. Then he typed a message. "Can you send me Audrey's number?" He looked at the screen before pressing send. The reply arrived almost immediately. Claire sent the number without comment. 3 seconds later, another message appeared. "Do not ruin this." Caleb placed the phone face down beside Captain Vega. 2 days passed before Caleb picked up his phone again. It was Wednesday evening. June sat cross-legged on the living room rug surrounded by markers, construction paper, and 3 empty cereal boxes she had decided were essential to Captain Vega's spacecraft. Caleb stood at the kitchen counter with Audrey's number open on the screen. He typed one sentence. "Captain Vega has reviewed your concerns. He says fuel is a problem for people without imagination." He read it twice, then a third time. June looked up from the floor. "Are you texting the woman from dinner?" Caleb locked the screen. "No, you are smiling at your phone. I am not smiling. You look strange. Thank you." June returned to drawing control panels. Caleb opened the phone again and pressed send before he could improve the message into something worse. Nothing happened. He placed the phone beside the sink and began washing a pan that was already clean. 10 minutes passed, then 20. June finished one side of the cereal box and moved to the next. Caleb told himself Audrey was busy. She ran a company. She probably received hundreds of messages every day. There was no reason to assume she had even seen his. At 38 minutes, the phone lit up. "Captain Vega is going to kill an entire crew." Caleb stared at the message. Then he typed. "He is traveling alone." The reply came faster. "That is worse." Caleb leaned one hand against the counter. June watched him from the floor. "You are definitely smiling." He ignored her. "Captain Vega believes leadership requires confidence. Confidence without planning is how people freeze in space. He says that sounds negative. He needs someone honest around him." Caleb looked at the words for a moment. Then he wrote, "Would you like to tell him yourself over coffee?" This time the silence lasted longer. Across the room, June held up a piece of cardboard covered in green circles. "Do these look like buttons?" "They look like peas." "They are buttons." "Then they look exactly right." June studied him. "You are not paying attention." "I am." "What did I say before the buttons?" Caleb looked at the phone. "I do not know." June nodded with quiet satisfaction. At Langford Strategic Holdings, Audrey sat alone in her office on the 31st floor. Most of the city had gone dark below her, but the river still carried broken reflections between the buildings. A takeout container rested unopened beside a stack of quarterly reports. Caleb's message glowed in her hand. "Would you like to tell him yourself over coffee?" The question was simple. That was what made it difficult. Men with complicated intentions often began with simple invitations. Coffee, dinner, a drink after work. The invitation was never the problem. The problem was the accounting that began after she accepted. Was he curious about her, about the company, about her money? Was he trying to prove that he was open-minded? Had Claire told him too much? Had the dinner made him feel heroic? Audrey looked toward the glass wall of her office where her own reflection stood over the city. She could see the version of herself other people saw. Expensive suit, controlled expression. A woman who had built a firm large enough to appear in business magazines and strong enough to frighten men who preferred powerful women as ideas rather than colleagues. She also saw the woman who had spent nearly 40 minutes deciding how to answer a request for coffee. Audrey typed, "Saturday morning, North Star Coffee in Lincoln Park, 10 o'clock. She paused before adding another sentence. "Captain Vega is not invited to make operational decisions." Caleb's answer arrived almost immediately. "He has been removed from command." Audrey set the phone down. For the first time that evening, she opened the takeout container. North Star Coffee occupied the corner of an old brick building near Lincoln Avenue. The windows fogged at the edges from the warmth inside. Students worked beneath hanging lights while couples leaned over small tables and spoke softly beneath the sound of grinding beans. Audrey arrived 12 minutes early. She chose a table near the back where she could see the entrance without appearing to watch it. She wore a black sweater, dark trousers, and a wool coat that did not require the assistance of a restaurant attendant. Her hair was down. She told herself the choice meant nothing. At 9:58, Caleb stepped inside. He found her almost immediately. His eyes moved across the room and stopped when they reached her. For 1 second, he simply looked. Audrey felt the old instinct rise. She wondered whether the sweater pulled too tightly across her stomach, whether the chair made her look larger, whether he had expected the formal version of her and was disappointed by the ordinary one. Then Caleb approached the table. "You chose a coffee shop named after a navigation system." Audrey looked up. "North Star is not a navigation system. Captain Vega disagrees. He has poor governance. He has been informed." Caleb removed his coat and sat across from her. He glanced at the untouched cup in front of her. "You waited. I ordered tea. You do not drink coffee. I drink coffee. I did not know how long you would take. I was 2 minutes early. That is still an unknown variable." Caleb smiled. "I understand why you manage money." A server came to the table. Caleb ordered coffee and a blueberry scone. Audrey watched him. "What you ordered without studying the menu. I have eaten a scone before. You did not compare options. I am trying to become reckless." The server walked away. Audrey folded her hands around the tea. They began with safe subjects. The weather, the train delays, the fact that Chicago drivers treated yellow lights as personal challenges. Then the conversation loosened. Caleb told her about June's Saturn project. Audrey asked to see a photograph. He opened his phone and showed her the cardboard spacecraft occupying half the living room. Captain Vega sat inside it wearing a crooked silver helmet. Audrey laughed. It came out quickly and without permission. She covered it with a cough. Caleb looked at her. That was almost a real laugh. It was a cough. It had structure. You inspect sounds now. Only unstable ones. She looked down at her tea, but the smile remained. Caleb put the phone away. Audrey asked how long he had been divorced. 5 years. And June was 3. Almost. Was it difficult? Yes. The answer was direct enough to change the air between them. Audrey waited. Caleb turned his coffee cup once. We were young. Rebecca and I met in college. We married at 24 because everyone around us was getting married and because we loved each other. You say that as if love was not enough. It was real. It just was not complete. Audrey listened. Caleb continued. We made plans for people we had not become yet. Then we kept trying to force ourselves into those plans after we changed. What changed? Everything small. He looked toward the window. She wanted to move closer to her family. I wanted to stay near the city projects. She wanted a different kind of life than the one we were building. I thought wanting something different meant she was rejecting me. And was she partly? His honesty surprised her. Caleb took a drink of coffee. I was not easy to live with. I worked too much. I went quiet when I was angry. I thought not shouting meant I was communicating well. Audrey leaned back. That is common among calm men. Rebecca would agree with you. Are you friends now? I do not know if friends is the word. We trust each other with June. That matters more. He looked toward Audrey. She is remarried. Her husband is good to June. I do not enjoy every part of that, but I am grateful for it. What part do you not enjoy? The part where another man knows which cereal June likes and what song she asks for before bed. Audrey held his gaze. Caleb gave a small shrug. It is not rational. He is not replacing me. But knowing something does not always stop you from feeling the opposite. Audrey lowered her eyes to the table. No, she said. It does not. A moment passed. Then she asked, do you miss being married? Caleb did not answer immediately. He turned the coffee cup again. Audrey noticed the movement but did not interrupt. Finally, he said, I miss having a witness. She looked at him. A witness, someone who cares about the small things. His voice softened. June says something funny. A project goes badly. I burn dinner. None of it is important enough to announce, but those things keep happening, and after a while you notice no one saw them. Audrey looked toward the window. Outside, a woman pulled a child in a red wagon while another child ran beside them. I understand that, she said. Caleb watched her. What about you? What about me? Have you ever been married, number close? Audrey turned the paper sleeve around her teacup. Not very. He waited. She appreciated that he did not fill the silence with another question. My mother founded a family investment office when I was a child, Audrey said. It was small, mostly family money, a few private clients, some commercial property. Caleb listened. She became ill when I was 24. I had been working there for 2 years. She asked me to take over while she went through treatment. How long was she sick? 3 years. Audrey's voice remained measured. She died 4 years ago. I am sorry. She was difficult. Caleb did not contradict her. Audrey continued. She was brilliant, exacting. She could identify weakness in a balance sheet faster than anyone I have ever met. She could also make an entire room feel incompetent with one sentence. What did she say when she handed you the company? Audrey gave a quiet laugh without humor. Do not make me regret trusting you. Caleb's expression changed. That was the last full conversation we had about the business. Did she ever make trust feel like anything other than a threat? Audrey looked at him. The question entered cleanly. No pity, no easy reassurance, just recognition. No, she said. Caleb nodded once. Audrey turned her teacup between her hands. By the time she died, the firm was already changing. I expanded into infrastructure, institutional funds, and municipal assets. It became Langford Strategic Holdings after the restructuring. $6 billion, 6.4. There are the commas. She smiled. Caleb looked at the nearly empty coffee shop around them. Do you like it, the work? Yes, Audrey thought. I like solving difficult things. That was not the question. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You notice too much. Occupational problem. She looked down at her tea. I like parts of it. I like being good at something that once frightened me. I like building systems that can survive mistakes. And the parts you do not like, the rooms. He waited. The rooms where I know what everyone sees before I speak. Audrey's fingers tightened around the cup. The rooms where I have to decide whether a comment is ignorant enough to correct or subtle enough to ignore. The rooms where being direct makes me difficult and being patient makes people think I agree with them. Caleb's voice was quiet. That sounds exhausting. It is familiar. That is not the same thing. Audrey looked at him. The server cleared their empty plates. When she walked away, Audrey noticed nearly 3 hours had passed. Neither of them mentioned it. They met again the following Saturday, then the Saturday after that. The meetings developed a rhythm without being formally scheduled. One of them would send a message in the middle of the week. Coffee Saturday, 10. The exchanges were brief. The conversations were not. At North Star, Caleb learned Audrey always ordered tea first and coffee second. Audrey learned he preferred the chair facing the window because he liked watching traffic patterns. He learned she hated raisins. She learned he disliked jazz that sounded like several people arguing in separate rooms. He learned that she read mystery novels on flights but never told anyone because she believed executives were expected to read biographies. She learned that Caleb kept an old elevator key from his father on his work desk. Some Saturdays they discussed things that mattered. Other Saturdays they argued about whether deep dish pizza counted as pizza. It has walls, Caleb said. That makes it architecture. It has cheese. So do many buildings in Wisconsin. That sentence should disqualify you from public service. I am not in public service. That explains the standards. Their laughter became easier. The silences did too. Audrey began to understand the way Caleb moved through conversation. When he was considering something, he turned his cup in slow quarter circles. If she spoke too quickly, the thought disappeared from his face. Caleb learned that Audrey's sentences became more precise when she felt uncertain. She used formal words as distance. She said acceptable when she meant frightening. She said interesting when she meant painful. She said I understand when she did not want to admit she cared. Their fourth meeting was dinner. Audrey suggested a restaurant near the river. Caleb searched the name online. There were photographs of white tablecloths, marble walls, and plates containing 3 carefully arranged vegetables. He called her. Is there a reason the menu has no prices? Probably because they change. That answer is worse. She was quiet for a second. We can go somewhere else. Caleb heard the shift in her voice. It was small, but it carried old expectation. He looked across his kitchen. June was at Rebecca's house. A pot of soup cooled on the stove. There is a Polish place near my office, he said. No marble. The menus have prices large enough to read from another table. Is the food good? Yes. Then send me the address. The restaurant was narrow and warm, with framed photographs of Warsaw on the walls and the smell of butter onions and baked bread in the air. Audrey arrived in a black car. The driver opened the door. Caleb was already waiting outside. He looked at the car, then at her. Your ride is cleaner than my apartment. Audrey adjusted her coat. You have not seen the inside of the car after a board retreat. They went inside. The host recognized Caleb and led them to a table near the kitchen. Audrey noticed the paper napkins and small vase with 1 plastic flower. You come here often? June likes the potato pancakes. Does Captain Vega? He is banned after an incident with sour cream. The meal was easy until the check arrived. Audrey reached for it. Caleb reached at the same time. Their hands stopped over the leather folder. The server looked between them. I can come back. No, Audrey said. Yes, Caleb said. The server left immediately. Audrey looked at him. This is not a test. I know. I invited you. You suggested dinner. That is an invitation. Then we can split it. Audrey sat back. You are uncomfortable with my money. Caleb did not deny it. I am uncomfortable with it deciding what role I have. Her expression tightened. What role do you want? I am still figuring that out. The answer surprised her. She had expected pride, or denial, or a speech about how money did not matter. Caleb continued. I am not embarrassed by what you have. I am proud of what I do. I do not want the difference between those things to decide who gets to choose. Audrey looked at the check. You think paying means choosing. Sometimes it does. And splitting it solves that? No. He leaned back. It starts a conversation. Audrey held his gaze. Then she opened the folder and placed half the amount inside. You calculate quickly. I manage money. I had forgotten. She smiled despite herself. After dinner, they walked toward the river. The air had turned colder. Wind moved between the buildings and carried the smell of water and exhaust. Audrey kept both hands inside her coat pockets. Caleb asked, Was there someone before? She looked at him. Before what? Before me asking questions you may not want to answer. Audrey looked toward the river. Yes. Caleb waited. She appreciated the waiting and resented that she appreciated it. His name was Harrison. How long? 10 months. Serious, I thought so. The bridge lights reflected in broken lines across the dark water. Audrey's voice became flatter. In private, he was affectionate, attentive. He remembered birthdays and sent flowers to my office. Caleb said nothing. In public, he walked ahead of me. He avoided photographs. At events, he introduced me as a business associate. She stopped near the railing. I told myself he was private. Caleb stood beside her. What happened? A woman at a conference asked whether we had broken up. Audrey looked at the water. I said we had not. She looked embarrassed and told me Harrison had been telling people he was not really dating me. Caleb's jaw tightened. He told his friends he was embarrassed to be seen with me. The wind caught a loose strand of Audrey's hair. She pushed it behind her ear. I knew before I knew. What do you mean I noticed the distance? The way he changed when someone important entered the room. The way he never touched me in photographs. Her voice softened. I kept correcting my own instincts because the truth felt too humiliating. Caleb looked toward the street. When he spoke, his voice was controlled. I do not feel sorry for you. Audrey turned sharply. I did not ask you to. I know. He looked at her. I think your instincts were working. You were trained not to trust them. The anger in her face shifted. Not gone, redirected. Audrey looked back at the water. That is a very careful distinction. It matters. Yes, she said. It does. A week later, Caleb forgot that lesson. They were at a crowded diner after visiting a weekend book market. Audrey ordered coffee and a slice of chocolate cake. A man at the next table glanced toward her plate. He was in his 50s, wearing a running jacket and the satisfied expression of someone who believed personal discipline gave him jurisdiction over strangers. That is a lot of sugar, he said. Audrey looked at him. I am aware. The man smiled. Just concerned. Diabetes is no joke. Caleb turned in his chair. Neither is speaking to people who did not ask. The man lifted his hands. I was trying to help. You were trying to enjoy yourself. Audrey put one hand on Caleb's wrist. Don't. The word was quiet. Caleb looked at her. The man shook his head and returned to his table. Audrey removed her hand. For the rest of the meal, she barely touched the cake. Outside, snow had begun to collect in the cracks of the sidewalk. Caleb followed her beneath the awning. I am sorry that happened. Audrey buttoned her coat. I did not ask you to confront him. He was insulting you, I know. Then why are you angry with me? Audrey looked at him. Because you did not ask what I wanted. He was sitting 3 feet away, and I was sitting closer. Caleb's expression tightened. I was trying to help. You were trying to make yourself useful. That is not fair. Audrey's eyes sharpened. No. What is not fair is having my choices taken away by cruel men and then taken away again by kind ones. Caleb went still. Audrey continued. You decided the situation belonged to you because you were angry. I thought you wanted someone to say something. You thought. You did not ask. The wind moved between them. Caleb looked toward the diner window. Inside, the man in the running jacket was laughing with his companion. Audrey's voice softened, but only slightly. I do not need you to become silent. I need you to remember that I am still in the room. She turned and walked toward her waiting car. Caleb did not follow. The next day he called. Audrey watched the phone ring from her kitchen counter. She almost let it stop. Then she answered. Hello, I am sorry. There was no greeting, no defense. Audrey said nothing. Caleb continued. I made your humiliation into my emergency. The sentence took some of the tension from her shoulders. I should have asked whether you wanted me to stay beside you or let you handle it. Audrey looked through the window at the gray city. And next time I ask. The answer came without hesitation. Audrey closed her eyes briefly. Okay. Caleb recognized the word from outside the restaurant. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But an opening. After a moment, he said, June wants to know whether Captain Vega should seek private funding. Audrey leaned against the counter. He has already demonstrated poor judgment. She believes that is common among founders. That is an unfair generalization. She is 8. Then it is an impressive generalization. Caleb smiled on the other end of the call. Audrey heard it. The following Saturday, they returned to North Star. Caleb asked before intervening when a man tried to take the chair beside Audrey without acknowledging her coat. Audrey said she wanted the coat moved, not the man corrected. Caleb moved it. The simplicity of the exchange mattered more than either admitted. A few days later, June asked Caleb whether Audrey was his girlfriend. They were making grilled cheese in the kitchen. Caleb turned the sandwiches in the pan. "I do not know." June sat at the table with Captain Vega. "You see her every Saturday. That is evidence, not a conclusion. She likes you. How do you know she sends messages? You do not read my messages. I see your face." Caleb looked at her. June pointed toward him. That face. He turned back to the stove. June placed Captain Vega upright. She should meet him. "Captain Vega, he needs investors. Audrey is not funding a mission to Saturn. She can say no herself." Caleb paused. The phrase sounded familiar. That evening he called Audrey. She answered from the back of her car. "Is everything all right?" "Yes. You called instead of texting. I can stop." "No." The word came too quickly. Audrey looked out at the city lights moving across the window. "Caleb said June asked about you." Audrey's hand tightened around the phone. "What did she ask? Whether you are my girlfriend?" A pause. "What did you say that I did not know?" Audrey stared at her reflection in the dark glass. "Was that true?" "Yes." She waited. Caleb continued. "She wants you to meet Captain Vega, professionally mostly. He needs funding. I have concerns about management, I told her." Audrey smiled faintly. Then Caleb's voice changed. "There is no pressure. June is curious, but I do not bring people into her life casually." Audrey's smile disappeared. The seriousness of the statement settled between them. "I understand. I am not asking for an answer tonight." She looked down at her hand. "It is not that I do not want to, I know. You do not know." "No," Caleb said. "But I know you are allowed to need time." The car stopped at a light. Audrey watched pedestrians cross in front of them. A father held the hand of a little girl in a purple coat. The girl jumped over every white stripe in the crosswalk while he adjusted his steps to match hers. "I will think about it," Audrey said. "Okay." After the call, Audrey remained in the car for several minutes after it reached her building. Upstairs, she removed her coat and placed her phone on the kitchen island. The apartment was immaculate. Glass stone clean lines and no object without a reason for being there. She poured a glass of water and opened the photograph Claire had sent after the dinner. 8 people stood beneath the restaurant's amber lights. Trevor faced the camera. Claire smiled. Mason looked tired. Audrey stood near the center, composed and distant. Caleb was beside her. Everyone else looked toward the lens. Caleb was looking at Audrey, not at her dress, not at the room, at her face. She enlarged the photograph until the image blurred slightly. Then she locked the phone and placed it face down. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. The phone lit up. A message from Caleb appeared. "June says Captain Vega's launch window is closing." Audrey stared at it. Then she typed, "Saturday afternoon, Adler Planetarium." His reply came a few seconds later. "I'll tell Mission Control." Audrey looked around the silent apartment. For once, the silence did not feel protective. It felt temporary. Saturday afternoon arrived beneath a pale Chicago sky. Audrey sat in the back of her car across from the Adler Planetarium and watched families move toward the entrance. Children ran ahead of their parents. Strollers rolled over the wide concrete path. A boy in a red coat pointed toward the lake as though he had discovered it himself. Audrey had arrived 7 minutes early. Her driver had already asked twice whether she wanted him to wait near the entrance. She had told him no. She was still sitting in the car. Her phone rang. "Caleb." Audrey answered without looking away from the building. "You are in the parking lot," he said. "How do you know you have been here long enough for the parking app to send me a notification?" "You receive parking notifications. I bought the tickets. That seems invasive. It is very useful at this moment." Audrey looked down at her hands. "I am coming in. You do not have to rush. I am not rushing. You sound like you are preparing for a deposition." She closed her eyes. "I am nervous." Caleb was quiet for a second. Audrey could hear voices behind him. Children, footsteps. June asking someone where Saturn was. "She is 8, Caleb said. "That is not reassuring. She is not evaluating you." Audrey watched a father lift a small child onto his shoulders. Everyone evaluates, June observes. Caleb's voice softened. That is different. Audrey looked toward the entrance again. What if she does not like me? Then she will probably tell us. That is also not reassuring. She is going to like you. You cannot know that. No, Caleb said, but I know her. The answer settled her more than certainty would have. Audrey picked up her coat. Where are you under Saturn? That is not a useful direction. It will be when you see it. He was right. A large model of Saturn hung from the ceiling inside the main hall. Its rings stretched over the crowd in a wide curve, casting shadows across the polished floor. Caleb stood beneath it in a gray coat. June stood beside him, holding Captain Vega under one arm and a notebook under the other. She was smaller than Audrey had imagined. That should not have surprised her. June was 8. Still, every story Caleb had told had made his daughter feel larger, more complete, as if she entered a room through language before her body arrived. June had Caleb's dark eyes. She also had a purple scarf, silver shoes, and a serious expression that suggested the meeting had a formal purpose. Caleb saw Audrey first. The tension in his face eased. He did not wave dramatically. He only smiled and touched June's shoulder. June turned. Her eyes moved over Audrey with open curiosity. There was no attempt to hide it. Audrey felt every old instinct rise at once. Stand straighter. Control your hands. Do not pull at the coat. Do not apologize for arriving. She crossed the hall. June stepped forward. You are Audrey. I am. My dad says you understand money. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. Audrey saw it. I understand some money. June held up Captain Vega. He needs funding. Audrey looked at the stuffed raccoon. His foil helmet had been reinforced with silver tape. A small cardboard badge had been attached to his chest. What is the projected cost of the mission? June opened her notebook immediately. Caleb looked at Audrey. You did that to yourself. Audrey ignored him. June showed her a page filled with drawings, arrows, numbers, and several words spelled creatively. The rocket costs $40. That is efficient. It is made of cereal boxes. That explains the savings. He also needs food. What does he eat? Mostly crackers. For a mission to Saturn, he does not like vegetables. Audrey crouched slightly to study the page. That could create a nutrition problem. June nodded. I told him. What is the return plan? June looked at Captain Vega. He did not plan one. Audrey looked at Caleb. Management concerns confirmed. Caleb placed one hand over his heart. I warned the board. June considered Audrey for another moment. Then she held out the notebook. You can carry this. Audrey accepted it carefully. Caleb noticed the meaning of the gesture. June did not hand her mission notebook to strangers. They entered the first exhibit hall. June moved quickly between displays, stopping every few feet to read a label aloud. She did not wait for the adults to catch up. Caleb followed with the patience of someone accustomed to moving at the speed of a child who believed every discovery was urgent. Audrey stayed beside June. At a model of the solar system, June pointed toward Jupiter. It is the biggest planet. It is. It has more gravity because it is bigger. Mass affects gravity. June looked at Audrey. You are much bigger than my mom. The sentence entered the space without warning. Caleb stopped walking. Audrey felt her body become still. The reaction was immediate and practiced. Her shoulders locked, her face emptied. Every room she had ever entered seemed to return at once. Every glance, every joke disguised as concern. Every man who had looked at her plate before looking at her face. June continued. That means you would probably have more gravity. Audrey looked at her. June pointed toward Jupiter. Bigger planets pull harder. For half a second, Audrey did not know whether to laugh. Caleb did not rush to apologize. He did not tell June the observation was rude. He looked at Audrey and asked quietly, Are you okay? The question gave the moment back to her. Audrey looked at June. Human gravity does not work exactly that way. June frowned. It should. Then she turned toward the next display. Come on. There is a moon with an ocean under the ice. She walked ahead. Audrey remained beside Caleb. The tension in her shoulders began to release. Caleb waited. I think I am okay, she said. You do not have to be. Audrey watched June press both hands against the glass of a Europa display. She was not trying to hurt me. No, she was trying to improve physics. That is most of her personality. Audrey gave a quiet laugh. They followed. June explained that Captain Vega was afraid of black holes but refused to admit it because commanders were not allowed to be afraid. Audrey glanced towards Caleb, who told him that June shrugged. He just knows. Audrey looked at the stuffed raccoon tucked beneath June's arm. Pretending not to be afraid usually makes the fear louder. June looked up. Is that what grown-ups do? Audrey met Caleb's eyes over June's head. Yes, she said. A lot of the time. June considered this. Captain Vega should probably admit it then. That would be a good beginning. They entered a dark theater where stars covered the ceiling. June sat between Caleb and Audrey. When the lights went down, she whispered every fact she already knew before the narrator could say it. Caleb leaned toward Audrey. She does this during movies, too. Audrey whispered back. She is providing expert commentary. She explained the plot of a mystery to me before the detective arrived. Was she right? Yes. Then you should listen. Halfway through the presentation, June placed Captain Vega in Audrey's lap. She did not ask permission. Audrey looked down. The raccoon's foil helmet reflected a faint blue light from the artificial stars. She held him gently. Caleb saw the way her fingers settled around the worn fabric. Something shifted in his chest. Not attraction alone, something quieter and more dangerous. The feeling of watching two separate parts of his life recognize each other. After the show, June took Captain Vega back and announced that he had been emotionally supported. They walked toward the museum cafe. June moved ahead with the notebook open, writing down the names of moons she had not known before. Caleb slowed. You are doing well. Audrey looked at him. I did not realize there was a performance review. There is not. You just said I was doing well. I meant you seem less nervous. Audrey watched June stop beneath a display and attempt to spell Enceladus. I am still nervous. That is allowed. She glanced toward him. You keep saying that. What? That things are allowed. Caleb put his hands into his coat pockets. Somebody should. The cafe was crowded. They found a table near the windows overlooking the lake. June ordered grilled cheese and apple slices. Caleb ordered soup. Audrey chose the same. June placed Captain Vega in the fourth chair. He does not eat in public, she explained. Security concerns, Audrey asked. He gets crumbs in his fur. That would compromise the suit. June nodded. The conversation moved through Saturn School and a classmate named Milo who had claimed the sun was a planet. He said it with confidence, June said. Audrey tore a piece of bread. Confidence is not evidence. That is what I told him. Caleb looked between them. You two have been together for 90 minutes and already formed a government. June ignored him. She asked Audrey whether rich people had normal refrigerators. Caleb nearly choked on his soup. Audrey considered the question. What is a normal refrigerator one with drawings on it? Audrey looked down at her bowl. My refrigerator does not have drawings. June took a bite of grilled cheese. That is sad. Caleb opened his mouth. Audrey stopped him with a glance. It is a little sad, she admitted. June swallowed. You can have one of mine. The offer was casual. Audrey felt it more deeply than June intended. What kind I draw planets? I would like a planet. June nodded as though a contract had been finalized. After lunch, June needed the restroom. Caleb walked her toward the hallway. Audrey remained near the windows with Captain Vega and the notebook. June stopped before disappearing through the door. She looked up at Caleb. I like her. Caleb glanced toward Audrey. She stood beside the glass with the stuffed raccoon under one arm watching the gray lake. Yeah, he said. She listened to the whole funding problem. That is impressive. You did not listen to all of it. I was cooking. You were standing near the stove. That is cooking. June frowned. Audrey listened. Caleb smiled. She did. June entered the restroom. Caleb walked back toward the table. Audrey looked at him. The acoustics in here are very good. Caleb stopped beside her. She likes you. I heard. You look surprised. I am. Why? Audrey looked down at Captain Vega. Children usually make me nervous. Most adults make you nervous. That is different. Adults hide it. Children do not. Yes. Caleb leaned one hand against the back of a chair. Does that make it worse? Audrey thought about June's comment near the model of Jupiter. No, she said. I think it makes it cleaner. June returned carrying her notebook. She walked directly to Audrey. Captain Vega is ready. Audrey handed him back. June tucked him under her arm. They spent another hour inside the museum. At the gift shop, June picked up a telescope and turned the box over. Caleb saw the price before she did. That stays here. June put it back without arguing. Audrey noticed. She said nothing. Outside, the November wind moved hard across the lake. Rebecca waited near the entrance. She wore a green coat and held a paper cup in both hands. June saw her and ran forward. Mom Audrey knows about investment risk. Rebecca looked at Caleb. Of course she does. Caleb introduced them. Rebecca, this is Audrey. Audrey, Rebecca. The two women shook hands. Rebecca's smile was polite, not cold. I have heard about Captain Vega's financial problems. Audrey looked toward June. They are significant. June began explaining the mission again. Caleb helped her find the missing strap on her backpack. For a moment, Rebecca and Audrey stood a few steps away from them. Rebecca watched June lean against Audrey's side while pointing to a drawing in the notebook. She attaches deeply, Rebecca said. Audrey looked at her. The words were calm but not casual. I know. I am not warning you away. Rebecca kept her eyes on June. I am asking whether you understand that disappearing would hurt more than Caleb. Audrey's face became still, not defensive, attentive. She looked toward June. I have spent most of my life expecting people to disappear from me. Rebecca turned. That was not my question. The correction was direct. Audrey absorbed it. Then she answered. I do not intend to become temporary. Rebecca studied her for a moment. She did not offer immediate approval. She only nodded. That is all I needed to hear. June ran toward them, holding up a drawing. I made Jupiter. The planet was purple and covered in silver stars. Rebecca smiled. It looks dangerous. It has gravity. June handed the picture to Audrey. This is for your refrigerator. Audrey took it. The paper moved in the wind. She held it with both hands. Thank you. June hugged her around the waist. The embrace was sudden. Audrey's arms stayed slightly raised for one startled second. Then she lowered them around June. Caleb watched. Rebecca watched too. Neither said anything. After Audrey left, Caleb walked with Rebecca and June toward the parking garage. June skipped ahead. Rebecca looked at him. You like her? Caleb watched Audrey's car disappear around the curve. Yes. June likes her. Yes. Rebecca stopped walking. Caleb turned. What do not hide behind being careful forever? I am not hiding. You are. Rebecca slipped one hand into her coat pocket. You have spent 5 years making your life small enough to control. I have a child. I know. She is also my child. Caleb looked toward June. Rebecca continued. Sometimes you are protecting her, sometimes you are protecting yourself and using her because it sounds nobler. The words irritated him because they were close enough to the truth. Rebecca started walking again. Caleb followed. That evening, Audrey taped June's drawing to her refrigerator. She did not own magnets. She used 2 pieces of clear office tape. The purple planet looked out of place against the stainless steel door. Audrey stood in the kitchen and stared at it. The apartment had always been quiet. She had once believed quiet meant peace. Now it sounded like the absence of something she had heard for several hours and already missed. 3 days later, Audrey sent Caleb a message. June's Jupiter is affecting the visual balance of my kitchen. Caleb replied. That means it is working. Audrey looked at the drawing again. She typed, Dinner on Friday. At your place? The question remained unsent for almost a minute. Then she pressed the screen. Caleb answered. June will insist on choosing the menu. I accept the risk. Friday evening, Audrey arrived at Caleb's apartment carrying a long rectangular box wrapped in silver paper. June opened the door before Caleb reached it. You came. I said I would. June looked at the box. What is that? Caleb appeared behind her. Hello to you too. June stepped aside. Audrey entered. The apartment smelled like tomato sauce and toasted bread. A stack of clean laundry sat on one end of the couch. School papers covered the table. Captain Vega occupied a chair with a paper badge that read, Mission Director. Audrey removed her coat. The room was smaller than her kitchen. It also felt more inhabited than her entire apartment. June pointed toward the box. Is it for Captain Vega? It is for the mission. Caleb looked at Audrey. "What did you bring a telescope?" He glanced at the brand printed on the side. His expression changed. "Audrey." June reached for the paper. Caleb placed a hand over the box. "Not yet." The excitement left June's face. Audrey noticed immediately. "Did I do something wrong?" Caleb looked toward June. "Go wash your hands. Dinner is almost ready." June hesitated. Then she carried Captain Vega toward the bathroom. When the door closed, Caleb lowered his voice. "This is too much." Audrey looked at the box. "It is a telescope. It is a very expensive telescope. She loves astronomy." "I know. Then what is the problem?" Caleb leaned against the table. "We need to talk about gifts." Audrey's shoulders tightened. "I was not trying to create a problem." "I know. You do not sound like you know." Caleb took a breath. "This is not about whether she deserves it." "Then what is it about?" "I do not want money to become the way you earn your place here." Audrey went still. The sentence landed harder than he intended. "I was not trying to buy a place." "I did not say you were." "You did." "No. I said I do not want that pattern to begin." Audrey looked toward the hallway. The bathroom faucet was running. Caleb lowered his voice further. "June would love that telescope. She would also connect it to you immediately. That was the point." "I know." His tone softened. "She needs to understand that your attention is the gift." Audrey looked at him. "And you think I do not understand that I think you are used to solving problems with resources? That is part of my job. This is not your job." The words entered the room sharply. Caleb saw the hurt before Audrey covered it. He stepped closer. "I am not rejecting you. It feels remarkably similar. I am trying to protect something." "There it is again. What protection?" Audrey folded her arms. "You tell yourself you are protecting June. You may be protecting your pride." Caleb looked at the telescope. The accusation was not entirely wrong. Audrey continued. "You are afraid anything I bring into this apartment will make what you provide look smaller." His jaw tightened. "That is not fair. It is not entirely unfair." They stood in silence. The bathroom door opened. June returned. She looked between them. "Are you arguing?" Caleb answered first. "We are talking. That is how adults say arguing." Audrey looked at June. "The telescope is not the right gift." June's face fell. Why Audrey searched for an answer that did not make the child responsible for adult tension. "Because I did not ask your dad first." June considered this. "You can ask now." Caleb almost smiled. Audrey crouched beside her. "I think I should choose something that belongs to both of us, not just something expensive." June looked toward the box. "Can we still look at it?" "Yes." "Then return it?" "Yes." June sighed. "That is inefficient." Audrey nodded. "It is." Dinner recovered slowly. June talked enough for all three of them. She described a disagreement at school, explained why Mars should have a better name, and asked Audrey whether billionaires had to do homework. Audrey said they did, but called it research. After dinner, Caleb washed dishes while Audrey helped June make a mission badge for Captain Vega. When June left the room to find scissors, Caleb turned toward Audrey. "You were right," she looked up. "About what part of it was pride?" Audrey waited. Caleb dried his hands. "I do not want my life to look small next to yours." Her expression softened. "I do not think your life is small." "I know." He looked around the apartment. "But I think I have been measuring it anyway." Audrey set down the paper badge. "I measure everything. That does not mean I have to." "No." Caleb looked at her. "Can we try again?" She glanced toward the hallway. "With the gift, with the conversation." Audrey nodded. "Yes." The following week, Audrey returned the telescope. She brought nothing to Caleb's apartment. 2 days later, she found an old star chart in a second-hand bookstore near her office. The paper was creased and yellowed at the corners. Constellations covered the dark blue surface in thin white lines. It cost $12. She took it to June. June stared at it for nearly a minute. "It is old, yes. Was it used by sailors, possibly, or spies, less likely?" June held it against her chest. "This is better than the telescope." Audrey looked toward Caleb. He did not say, "I told you so." He only smiled. Several weeks passed. Audrey became part of Friday dinners. Not every Friday. Enough that June stopped asking whether she was coming and began asking what time. Caleb learned to make tea without asking which kind. Audrey learned where the extra napkins were kept. She learned June disliked peas but would eat them if they were mixed into rice. She learned Caleb left cabinet doors open when distracted. She began closing them without comment. One evening, Caleb told Audrey about a promotion at work. They sat at the kitchen table after June had gone to bed. The senior position would place him in charge of a major bridge rehabilitation project. Audrey looked up from her tea. "That is good. I am probably going to decline." "Why the schedule? Have they said the schedule cannot be adjusted?" "No, did you ask no?" Audrey watched him. Caleb turned his cup. She waited for the thought to finish. "I do not want them to think I cannot handle the role." Audrey leaned back. "You are deciding what they will think before they have the chance to answer." Caleb looked at her. She raised one eyebrow. "You do that too?" He smiled faintly. "I hate when you learn things. You have confused learning with remembering. What would you do? Ask for what you need. And if they say no, then you decide with real information." Caleb looked toward June's closed bedroom door. Audrey continued. "Being a father is not evidence that you are less committed. It is evidence that you manage competing responsibilities every day. You make it sound simple. It is not simple." Her voice softened. "It is still worth asking." On Monday, Caleb asked. By Wednesday, the firm had agreed to flexible site hours and 2 remote planning days each month. Caleb called Audrey from the sidewalk outside his office. "They said yes." "I know." "How do you know you would not have called this quickly if they said no?" He looked up at the buildings. "You were right. I know. That was unpleasantly fast." Audrey laughed. Caleb closed his eyes and listened to the sound. Friday night they celebrated with takeout. June fell asleep on the couch before the movie ended. Captain Vega rested beneath her chin. Caleb carried her to bed. When he returned, Audrey was standing in the kitchen stacking containers. The apartment had gone quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Caleb took a container from her hands. "You do not have to clean. I am not cleaning. I am preventing structural failure. You have been spending too much time with me. I was afraid of that." Their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. Caleb turned. Audrey looked up at him. The distance between them became noticeable all at once. Her breathing changed. Caleb's eyes moved from her face to her mouth, then back again. He did not close the space. "Can I kiss you?" Audrey stared at him. The question entered her more deeply than the kiss itself might have. He was waiting, not performing patience, actually waiting. "Yes," she said. Caleb lifted one hand and touched the side of her face. The kiss was gentle, careful at first, then warmer when Audrey leaned closer. Her fingers closed around the front of his shirt. For several seconds the apartment disappeared. No boardroom, no restaurant, no strangers watching. Only the quiet kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator and Caleb's hand resting against her cheek as though he had nowhere else to be. When they separated, Audrey kept her forehead against his. "You ask now," she whispered. "I am learning." She smiled. "So am I." Later, Audrey sat in the back of her car with June's old star chart resting across her lap. Her driver looked at her through the mirror. Home Audrey turned toward Caleb's apartment building. One window on the 3rd floor was still lit. She could imagine the rooms behind it. June asleep beneath glow in the dark stars. Captain Vega on the pillow. Caleb standing in the kitchen, probably leaving another cabinet door open. Audrey had spent years building a home no one could disrupt. Now the word felt less certain, not because she had nowhere to return, because she had found somewhere she wanted to be expected. She took out her phone. "I am not searching for the hidden reason tonight," Caleb replied a minute later. "Progress." Audrey looked through the window as the car pulled away from the curb. "Temporary ceasefire." His answer appeared before they reached the corner. "I'll take it." Audrey rested the phone beside the star chart. For once, the city outside did not feel like something she had to cross alone. The peace lasted 9 days. On the 10th morning, Audrey woke before the alarm and reached for her phone in the dark. The screen showed 6 missed calls. 3 from her chief legal officer, 2 from Claire. One from a board member who never called before 7 unless something had already gone wrong. Audrey sat up. The apartment was silent around her. Beyond the windows, Chicago had not yet become morning. The river was a dark strip between towers. Red lights blinked from rooftops. Snow pressed against the glass in thin, uncertain lines. She opened the first message. "Call me before you open anything." Audrey opened everything. The article appeared near the top of a national business site. The headline did not mention her company at first. It mentioned her. The private instability behind Chicago's most controversial CEO. Audrey read the title twice. Then she opened the story. The first paragraphs described Langford Strategic Holdings as one of the most aggressive investment firms in the Midwest. The writer praised Audrey's intelligence in the careful way people praised a woman before cutting into her. Then the language changed. Anonymous former executives questioned her judgment. One source described her as increasingly emotional and distracted. Another claimed she had created a culture built around personal loyalty rather than professional discipline. A third said her recent relationship with a divorced city engineer had raised concerns about whether she was mixing private need with public image. Caleb was not named, not directly. The description was enough. The final paragraph carried the line that made Audrey's hand go cold. Investors may soon ask whether a leader who has struggled so visibly to manage herself can continue managing billions for others. Audrey stared at the sentence. The words were polished. The cruelty was not. Her body had been transformed into evidence. Her relationship had been transformed into weakness. Every insult she had spent years pretending not to hear had been gathered, edited, and published beneath a photograph of her entering a conference. She closed the article, then opened it again. She read every word. At 6:20, she called her chief legal officer. "Who is the source? We have a strong suspicion. I want certainty. We are working on it. What has the board seen everything?" Audrey stepped out of bed. "Schedule them for 8. They asked for 7:30. Then they can wait until 8. She ended the call. In the bathroom, she turned on the light. Her reflection appeared in the mirror. No makeup, hair loose. The dark blue sleep shirt Caleb had once said made her look like someone who might own a lighthouse. The memory entered without permission. Audrey looked away. By 7:15, she was dressed in a charcoal suit. She chose it because it fit well. Then hated herself for thinking about why she had chosen it. At 8:11, members of the board sat around a glass table on the 32nd floor. Some had arrived in person. Others appeared on screens. The article lay printed in front of each chair. Audrey entered carrying no notes. Her chief legal officer, Marcus Hill, sat near the far end with a folder open before him. He was a careful man in his late 40s who rarely showed surprise. That morning his jaw was tight. Audrey took her seat. "Let us begin." A board member named Paul Wexler cleared his throat. "We need to discuss reputational exposure. Define it." Paul looked at the article. "The piece is spreading quickly. That is not a definition. It raises questions." "What questions?" A woman on the screen leaned closer. "Audrey, no one here is endorsing the language." "That is also not an answer." Paul placed both hands on the table. "The concern is whether personal attention is beginning to interfere with the firm." Audrey looked at him. In what measurable way no one spoke. She opened the folder Marcus had placed beside her and removed several pages. "Quarterly performance is ahead of projection by 6%. Client retention is unchanged. 3 new institutional accounts signed this month. Regulatory review is current. Employee turnover is below the industry average." She placed the pages in the center of the table. "If my personal life has created a business risk, identify it." Paul looked toward another board member. Audrey continued, "If the risk is the article itself, then say that. If the risk is that a woman of my size is dating a man whose salary is lower than mine, then say that too." The room became still. A man on one of the screens shifted in his chair. "No one is saying that, the article is. That is not the board. Then do not repeat its logic in softer language." Marcus lowered his eyes toward the folder. For a moment, the only sound came from the ventilation system. Then Paul said, "We need to know whether there is anything else coming." Audrey looked at Marcus. He turned a page. "We believe the source is Grant Lowell." Several people reacted at once. Grant had served as a senior executive at Langford for 4 years. He had been dismissed 6 months earlier after an internal review uncovered unauthorized consulting payments tied to a vendor contract. Paul frowned. "Can we prove it? Not yet," Marcus said. But the writer contacted 2 former employees using details that only Grant and the internal review team had. Audrey looked around the table. "Then we proceed on facts. We preserve all records. We prepare a response. We do not panic because a man who was fired for misconduct has discovered adjectives." Paul leaned back, and the relationship Audrey turned toward him slowly. "What about it? Will the engineer be making any public statement? His name is Caleb Hart." Paul's expression tightened. "I am aware. No, you are aware of his role in the article." Audrey's voice remained quiet. "He is not a communications asset. He is a person." Paul said nothing. Audrey closed the folder. "The meeting is over." At 9:40, Caleb stood beneath the Wells Street Bridge wearing a hard hat and a reflective vest. Steel rose above him in dark geometric lines. Trucks moved over the temporary lane while workers shouted measurements across the platform. His phone had been vibrating inside his coat for nearly 20 minutes. He ignored it until the inspection was complete. Then he climbed down, removed one glove, and looked at the screen. Mason had called twice. Claire had sent 4 messages. Rebecca had written only one. "Call me before June hears anything." Caleb opened the article. He read it standing beside the river with snow collecting on his shoulders. The first part made him angry. The final paragraph made him see red. He read the description of himself again, a divorced municipal engineer of modest means. The words were designed to make him feel small. They failed. The words about Audrey did not. He called her. She did not answer. He called again. Nothing. At the office, Audrey sat behind her desk while her communications director reviewed possible statements. "We can deny that the relationship has affected your professional judgment." Audrey looked up. "That sentence accepts the premise. We need to reassure clients, then reassure them with performance." The director hesitated. "The personal element is driving attention, because the article made it personal." "Yes." Audrey turned toward the windows. Her phone lit up again. "Caleb." She watched his name disappear. The communications director closed her notebook. "Do you want 5 minutes?" "No." "You have not looked away from that phone for 30 seconds. Audrey picked it up and locked the screen. I said no. At noon, Claire entered without waiting for permission. Audrey's assistant followed behind her. "I told her you were in a meeting," the assistant said. Claire removed her gloves. "She knows I do not care." Audrey nodded toward the door. "It is fine." The assistant left. Claire placed her purse on the chair. "You did not call me. I have been working. You read it." "Yes." "Are you all right?" Audrey looked at her, the familiar question, the familiar answer waiting behind her teeth. "I am fine." She did not say it. "I do not know." Claire sat down. "That is allowed." Audrey nearly laughed. "He says that." Caleb Audrey looked toward the phone. "He called, and you ignored him. I cannot talk to him until I know what this becomes." Claire's face changed. "What does that mean?" "It means I need information." "No. It means you are preparing to disappear before he has the chance to decide whether he stays." Audrey stood. "This is not about me. It is exactly about you. There is a child involved." Claire's expression softened. "Then talk to him." "I will." When Audrey did not answer, Claire stood. "You have spent years saying people make choices about you without knowing you. Do not do the same thing to him." After Claire left, Audrey opened Caleb's messages. "Call me. Then I am not asking whether you are fine. Then I want to hear your voice." Audrey pressed the phone against her forehead. She wanted to call. Wanting made the danger feel larger. At 3:15, Caleb arrived at June's school. The principal's assistant met him near the office door. "June is not hurt." Caleb's stomach tightened anyway. "What happened?" She struck another student. Caleb stared at her. "June." The assistant nodded. Inside the office, June sat in a plastic chair with Captain Vega clutched against her chest. Her purple scarf had come loose. One shoelace was untied. Her face was red from holding back tears. A boy sat across the room with an ice pack against his arm. Caleb crouched in front of June. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Did you hit him?" The tears began immediately. He said, "You only like Audrey because she buys you things." The room became very quiet. Caleb looked toward the boy. The principal stepped between them with gentle urgency. "We have spoken with both children." Caleb returned his attention to June. "You cannot hit someone because they say something cruel. He said she was too big for you." June's voice broke. "And that you were poor." Caleb closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he sat in the chair beside her. "Look at me." June did. "You are not responsible for defending me. He was lying, I know. He was lying about Audrey, too." "I know." June wiped her face with one sleeve. "Then why did I get in trouble?" "Because hitting him was still wrong. That is not fair." "No," Caleb said, "it is not." The principal asked the boy to apologize. He did so without looking at June. June apologized for hitting him. She did not look at him either. In the car, she sat in the back seat with Captain Vega beside her. Snow slid across the windshield. Caleb drove 2 blocks before June spoke. "I know you do not like Audrey because she is rich." Caleb looked at her in the mirror. "You are right." Then why did he say it? Because he heard an adult say something they did not understand. Why would an adult say it? Caleb stopped at a red light. He searched for an answer that would not place the weight of the world inside an 8-year-old. Sometimes people see something they do not expect, and instead of learning, they invent an ugly reason. June frowned. What do they not expect that Audrey and I would choose each other? Why not Caleb looked through the windshield? Because some people think a woman who looks like Audrey should be grateful for any attention. Other people think a man who earns less money must want something if he loves a wealthy woman. June considered this. That is stupid. Yes. What is the real reason? Caleb's hands tightened around the steering wheel. The real reason for why you like her. The light changed. Cars moved behind them. Caleb drove forward. I love being around her. June looked out the window. That is simple. Yes. Do you love her? Caleb did not answer immediately. June did not press. She rested her head against the seat. By the time they reached home, Captain Vega had been placed under temporary disciplinary review for encouraging violence. Caleb made soup. June completed a written apology to the boy. Then she drew a picture of Jupiter beside it and refused to explain why. At 6, Caleb called Audrey again. This time she answered. Hello? Her voice was controlled. Too controlled. Caleb stood near the kitchen window while June watched television in the next room. We need to talk. I know. June heard about the article. Silence. Audrey's breathing changed. What happened? A child at school repeated something his parents said. What did he say? Caleb told her. He did not soften it. Audrey sat at the edge of her office chair. The city beyond the glass blurred slightly. Is she all right? She hit him. Audrey closed her eyes. This is exactly what I was afraid of. June is okay. She hit someone because of me. She hit someone because she is 8 and angry. She should never have been placed in that position. Our life placed her there. No. Audrey stood. Your life was stable before me. Caleb heard the direction of the sentence before she finished it. Do not do this. Do what turned leaving into an act of protection. Audrey walked toward the window. You do not understand what exposure to my life costs. Then explain it. I have been explaining it since the first dinner. No, you have been telling me what happened to you. His voice remained steady. You have not allowed me to decide what I can carry. Audrey's jaw tightened. You have a child. You do not get to gamble with her privacy because you are trying to prove something to me. Caleb became very still. I am not proving anything. You confronted Trevor after knowing me for 2 hours. You confronted a stranger in a diner. You keep turning every insult into a test of your character. That is not what this is. You enjoy being the man who does not behave like the others. The words left Audrey before she could stop them. Silence followed. Caleb looked toward the living room. June sat on the couch, holding Captain Vega. The television was on, but she was not watching it. Caleb lowered his voice. Is that what you think? Audrey pressed one hand against the window. I think you do not understand the scale of this. I have stayed long enough to learn. A few months is not long enough. It was long enough for you to bring me into your home, long enough to meet June, long enough to let her care about you. Audrey flinched. Caleb continued. You do not get to call all of that temporary the moment you become afraid. I am trying to protect her, no. You are trying to control the ending. The sentence struck cleanly. Audrey turned away from the window. Caleb's voice hardened. You keep saying people reduce you to your body and your money. Right now you are reducing me to a man too naive to understand consequences. That is not what I said. It is what you mean. You have no idea what they will do if this continues. Then let me decide whether I stay. Audrey's eyes filled with anger. You do not get to make that decision alone. Neither do you. The words stood between them. Caleb took a breath. You demand that I respect your choices. You need to respect mine. Audrey said nothing. He waited. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. I cannot be the reason June is hurt. You are not. I am part of it. Yes. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. And so am I. That is what a relationship is. We do not remove one person every time the cost becomes visible. Audrey looked down. I need time. Caleb's jaw shifted. Take it. He ended the call. Audrey remained beside the window with the phone in her hand. The office reflected around her. Glass walls, perfect lines. No sound except the city far below. She had imagined distance would feel safer. Instead, it felt like standing in a room after the lights had gone out. For 4 days, they did not speak. Caleb woke at 6, packed June's lunch, drove to the bridge site, attended meetings, collected June from school, made dinner, checked homework, and closed the apartment door each night. His life continued with cruel efficiency. On Friday morning, he poured 2 cups of coffee. He stared at the second one, then emptied it into the sink. Audrey worked until midnight every evening. Her lawyers confirmed that Grant Lowell had contacted the journalist. They found messages linking him to 2 former employees. The cease and desist letter was prepared. Audrey signed it without hesitation. The decision brought no satisfaction. On Saturday, her car passed North Star Coffee. Audrey looked through the window. Their usual table was empty. She turned her face away before the driver could notice. June asked about Audrey only once. They were folding laundry. Is she busy? Caleb matched 2 socks. Yes. Is she coming Friday? I do not know. June placed Captain Vega on top of a stack of towels. She said she was not leaving. Caleb looked at his daughter. She did. Then she is coming. June returned to the socks as though the matter had been settled. On Monday afternoon, Audrey sat across from Dr. Lena Park. The office was warm and deliberately ordinary. 2 chairs, a bookshelf, a small plant that Audrey had once accused of being emotionally manipulative because it always leaned toward the light. Dr. Park listened while Audrey described the article, the board meeting, June's fight, and the argument. When Audrey finished, Dr. Park asked, was Caleb wrong? Audrey looked toward the plant, about which part deciding for him. Audrey crossed one leg over the other. I was considering June. That was not my question. Audrey almost smiled at the familiar correction. No, she said. He was not wrong. Why did you do it? Because he does not understand the consequences. Dr. Park waited. Audrey exhaled. Because if I leave first, I can call it protection. And what is it, fear? The word sat heavily in the room. Dr. Park folded her hands. What would staying require? Audrey looked down at her fingers. Trust. In Caleb, in the idea that I do not have to predict every ending. Dr. Park said nothing. Audrey looked toward the window. I have spent my whole life finding weak points before collapse. That skill built your company. Yes, it may not build a relationship. Audrey closed her eyes. I know. Across the city, Rebecca stood in Caleb's kitchen while June slept in the bedroom. She had brought a casserole Caleb had not asked for and placed it in the refrigerator beside a half-empty carton of milk. Caleb leaned against the counter. She thinks she is protecting June. Rebecca folded her arms. Do you believe her? Yes. Do you believe that is all she is doing? No. Rebecca nodded. Caleb looked toward the hallway. I do not know how to protect June from this. You cannot protect her from every cruel thing people might say. I can choose what I bring near her. Rebecca looked at him. You brought Audrey near her. Caleb said nothing. Rebecca continued. June is better for knowing her. That does not erase what happened at school. No, it gives June someone worth defending. Caleb frowned. By punching another child, that part needs work. Despite himself, Caleb smiled. Rebecca's expression softened. Stability does not mean nothing changes. She picked up her coat. It means the adults do not run every time change becomes difficult. Caleb looked down at the counter. I did not run. No. Rebecca opened the door. But you are very good at standing still until someone else does. She left. 2 evenings later, Audrey stood outside Caleb's apartment. There was no black car at the curb. She had taken a cab and dismissed it immediately. Snow rested along the steps. Her breath appeared in the cold. She pressed the buzzer. Caleb opened the building door but did not smile. Audrey climbed the stairs. When she reached the 3rd floor, he stood in the apartment doorway wearing a gray shirt with the sleeves pushed to his elbows. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Audrey said, "You were right." Caleb waited. "I made your decision for you." Her hands were inside her coat pockets. I called it protection because fear sounded less respectable. Caleb's expression changed slightly. Not forgiveness, attention. Audrey continued, "I do not know how to be in something I cannot control. Neither do I. You look better at it. I am not." He leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "What do you want?" Audrey took a breath. "I want to stay." The words came quietly. "I also want us to decide together what June is exposed to, what we say publicly and what we keep private." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "That is a conversation, I know. You cannot leave every time the conversation becomes frightening, I know, and I cannot speak for you every time someone is cruel." Audrey nodded. "I know that too." Caleb stepped aside. Audrey entered. The apartment smelled like grilled cheese and laundry detergent. June appeared from the hallway in pajamas. She stopped when she saw Audrey. Her eyes moved quickly between the adults. "Are you leaving?" Audrey removed her coat. "No." June studied her. "Good." She walked toward the couch and picked up Captain Vega. "He already added you to the crew." Audrey's eyes filled. This time she did not look away. "I am honored." June handed her the stuffed raccoon. "You need to sign the rules. There are rules, a lot." Caleb closed the door behind Audrey. The 3 of them sat at the kitchen table. Audrey explained that some people were saying untrue things about her and Caleb. She did not mention Grant. She did not mention the board. She did not describe the comments about her body. June listened with both hands around a cup of warm milk. "Are the people stupid?" she asked. Caleb said June. Audrey answered before he could continue. "Some of them are afraid of things they do not understand." June looked at her. "Why are they afraid of you?" Audrey considered the question. "Because I do not fit the story they expect." June drank her milk. "You fit our story." Caleb looked down. Audrey pressed her lips together. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Captain Vega fell from the chair. June announced that he had fainted from emotional pressure. The room began breathing again. After June went to bed, Caleb and Audrey remained at the table. A folded invitation sat near the fruit bowl. Audrey recognized the gold lettering. The Chicago Futures Foundation Gala. She touched the edge of the envelope. "You are still planning to go, I was." Audrey looked at him. "The room will be full of donors, reporters, board members, and people who read the article." Caleb folded his arms on the table. "Do you want me there?" The question returned her choice. No assumption, no performance. Audrey looked toward June's bedroom, then back at Caleb. "Yes." His answer came without hesitation. "Then I will be there." Audrey held his gaze. The fear did not disappear. It changed shape. It became something they could look at together. On the night of the gala, Audrey stood before her closet. Rows of dresses hung beneath soft light. For years, formal events had begun with the same calculation. Which color drew less attention? Which fabric concealed more? Which shape made her body easier for the room to forgive? Her hand moved past black, past navy, past the silver gown her stylist had described as flattering. She reached for burgundy. The dress did not make her smaller. It made no apology. Audrey removed it from the hanger. Across the city, Caleb stood in front of his bedroom mirror adjusting a black tie. June sat on the bed holding Captain Vega. "You look nervous," she said. "I am fixing the tie. That is what you said about your sleeves." Caleb looked at her reflection. June smiled. He picked up his jacket. What should I do if I get scared? June considered the question seriously. Tell the truth. Caleb nodded. That seems difficult. It usually is. He kissed the top of her head. Rebecca waited in the living room to take June for the night. At the door, June called after him. Dad. Caleb turned. She held up Captain Vega. He says do not be boring. Caleb smiled. I make no promises. An hour later, gold light filled the Chicago Cultural Center. Music rose beneath the glass dome. Audrey stood near the balcony with one hand around a champagne glass. Caleb stood beside her. Across the ballroom, 3 people near the bar began to whisper. One of the men glanced toward Caleb. He is the engineer, right? The woman beside him lifted her champagne glass. Single father, city salary. The second man smiled. That explains the appeal. The first man looked toward Audrey, or the arrangement. The woman laughed softly. At least she found someone willing to be photographed with her. Audrey heard every word. Her face did not change. Only one finger tightened around the stem of her glass. Caleb noticed. He looked at the group, then back at Audrey. Do you want to leave? She kept her eyes on the ballroom. No. Do you want me to say something? Audrey turned toward him. The question caught her off guard even though she had heard it before. He was not deciding for her. He was waiting. She placed her glass on a passing tray. Yes, she said, but do not rescue me. Caleb's expression remained steady. I was not planning to. They crossed the ballroom together. The string quartet continued beneath the glass dome, but the conversations nearest the bar began to fade. The woman saw them approaching and arranged her face into a welcoming smile. Audrey, Caleb, we were just saying how wonderful you look together. Caleb stopped several feet away. No, you were not. The first man gave a nervous laugh. I think you misunderstood. Audrey stepped forward. I heard you clearly. The man shifted his drink from one hand to the other. Audrey looked at each of them. You are curious why a man like Caleb would choose a woman who looks like me. No one answered. What you cannot imagine, she continued, you have decided must have been purchased. The second man frowned. No one said purchased. You did not need to. Caleb's voice was calm. You described my job, my salary, and her money as if they were pieces of evidence. The first man looked around. People are going to wonder. Caleb held his gaze. They wonder because they have spent so long treating her body like an explanation that they never bothered to learn anything else about her. Audrey's breath caught. Caleb continued, She does not need me to make her worthy of this room. He turned toward her. And I am not here because she needs someone willing to tolerate being seen with her. The woman lowered her eyes. Several guests had stopped pretending not to listen. A reporter near the edge of the group held a phone at her side, no longer typing. The first man cleared his throat. You are making this more dramatic than it was. Audrey looked at him. No, you are uncomfortable because the part you meant to keep hidden has been spoken aloud. The room became completely still. For years, Audrey had allowed people to hide behind tone, behind jokes, behind concern, behind the protection of pretending that cruelty only counted when someone admitted it. She had survived those rooms by becoming unreadable. Tonight, she did not want to survive the room. She wanted to remain fully inside it. For most of my career, Audrey said, people have treated my body as public information and my success as a contradiction requiring an explanation. Her voice carried farther than she expected. You do not ask whether an ordinary-looking man earned his authority every time he enters a room. You do not study his marriage for proof that someone must have settled. One of the men opened his mouth. Audrey raised one hand. He stopped. My company's performance is public. My relationship is not an asset you are entitled to value. She looked toward the reporter. If you quote me, quote that accurately. The reporter nodded. A donor standing nearby approached Caleb after the group dispersed. You are brave to stand beside her through all of this. Caleb's expression cooled. I am not standing beside a disaster. The donor blinked. Caleb looked toward Audrey. She is not a burden I agreed to carry. She is my partner. Audrey heard the word. Partner. Not responsibility, not exception. Not a woman fortunate enough to be chosen. A partner. She looked away before the emotion on her face became too visible. Caleb noticed anyway. He leaned closer. "Do you need air?" Audrey nodded. They stepped onto a stone balcony overlooking Washington Street. The winter wind moved between the columns. Cars passed below in bright lines. Snow rested along the ledges and rooftops. The music from the ballroom became distant. Audrey placed both hands on the railing. For several seconds, neither spoke. Caleb removed his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. Audrey looked at him. "I am not cold. You are shaking." She looked down at her hands. He was right. I thought I would feel stronger. You spoke in front of half the city. I speak in front of people every week, not like that. Audrey stared at the traffic below. I spent years believing that if I stayed composed, no one could take anything from me. Caleb rested one hand on the railing beside hers. Did it work? No, she gave a quiet laugh. It only made them think I did not feel it. Caleb looked toward her. You do not have to look untouched for me to believe you are strong. Audrey closed her eyes for a moment. You told them I was the only person at that dinner you wanted to know. I meant it. You barely knew me. I knew enough. She turned. What did you know? Caleb considered the question. That you were tired and still kind. Audrey's expression softened. That you could have humiliated Trevor and chose precision instead. That you listened when people spoke even when they had nothing useful to say. A faint smile touched his mouth. And you took Captain Vega's mission seriously. He lacked governance. He still does. The wind moved Audrey's hair across her cheek. Caleb reached out and tucked it back gently. I fell in love with you at the planetarium. Audrey stared at him. June told me I had planetary gravity. That was part of it. When did you know when she handed you Captain Vega? Audrey waited. You held him like he mattered because he mattered to her. Caleb's voice lowered. I watched you listen to my daughter and I realized you were not trying to impress either of us. You were simply there. Audrey looked down. I kept waiting for the hidden reason. There is not one. I know. The words came quietly. They frightened her less than they once had. Caleb did not move closer. He allowed the truth to remain hers. Audrey looked at him again. I love you. Caleb's face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. He had been carrying the answer for weeks. I love you too. Audrey laughed once through the tears gathering in her eyes. You could have said that sooner. I was waiting for you to finish. You always do that, only when the thought matters. She stepped closer. Caleb touched the side of her face. When he kissed her, the ballroom disappeared behind them. There was no audience, no article, no board, only winter air city lights and the quiet certainty of being chosen without explanation. The following morning, Dana Ruiz published her article. She did not write about an ordinary man rescuing a lonely billionaire. She wrote about a business culture that treated women's bodies as evidence and relationships across class lines as transactions. She quoted Audrey exactly. My company's performance is public. My relationship is not an asset you are entitled to value. She also quoted Caleb. She is not a burden I agreed to carry. She is my partner. The article did not change everyone. It changed who controlled the story. Grant Lowell withdrew several claims after Langford's lawyers presented evidence linking him to the false statements. The board formally dismissed the accusations. Audrey did not return to silence. She introduced new company policies addressing appearance-based harassment and anonymous retaliation. Not because every cruel person could be corrected, because the people forced to endure them deserved a structure that did not require constant personal courage. Caleb and Audrey built their shared life through smaller decisions. They sat at his kitchen table one Sunday afternoon and discussed money. Audrey agreed not to make expensive purchases for June without asking. Caleb agreed not to reject every generous act simply to prove independence. They did not pretend the difference between their lives had disappeared. They gave it rules. Rebecca and Audrey attended June's school science night together. When another parent assumed Audrey was June's mother, Audrey corrected her immediately. Rebecca is her mother. I am Audrey. Later, Rebecca thanked her. Audrey answered, June does not need anyone competing for a title. Rebecca looked toward June, who was explaining Saturn's rings to a classmate. No, she said. She needs adults who stay. Caleb accepted the senior project role. Months later, the restored bridge reopened beneath a bright spring sky. Audrey stood in the crowd among city workers, parents, and children. No private balcony, no reserved section. June held Captain Vega above her head as though he were personally responsible for the construction. After Caleb finished speaking, he looked across the crowd. He found Audrey immediately. She was the witness he had once described, the person who cared when the small thing became large. That evening, the three of them walked across the bridge. The Chicago River reflected the city lights below. June ran ahead with Captain Vega tucked under one arm. Audrey stopped near the center. She placed both hands on the railing. Caleb stood beside her. "You once told me bridges do not have to be beautiful. I said beauty is not the first requirement. What is? They have to carry the weight." Audrey looked toward June, then back at him. "And if the weight, you reinforce the structure." Caleb reached for her hand. "You do not abandon the bridge." Audrey smiled. Not the controlled smile from the blind dinner. The full one. The one that no longer asked permission. June called from the far side. "Are you coming?" Caleb and Audrey looked toward her. Then they continued across the bridge together.